and people who are dumping their, condos in Manhattan and moving out to other places. Do you think it's just they do not understand what they're doing, or they're afraid that can eventually catch up with them and they won't be able to sell their house or rent their house for what it's actually worth?
Whenever you have any sort of like major political change or ideology, there's always like some sort of fear that's behind it from a group of people that will take that fear and then just immediately apply it because they're worried about something. Yes, of course. Do I think that it's going to possibly create drastic change in New York? I don't think it's going to be like a light switch and something's going to flip. If in fact these policies do, because at the end of the day, just because somebody said it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen.
And on the other side, something that we discussed as well is the new mayor of New York City and rent freezes in New York. What do you think about that, and how do you think that would affect our Philadelphia market?
I think that the idea to freeze rents, I think, will only continue to lock up supply.
We're here to share insights and experiences, not legal or accounting advice. Be sure to talk to your attorney, accountant, or professional advisor before making any decisions. Everyone's situation is different. Get the help that is right for you. Hi, welcome back to the Philly Landlord Guide, the show for real landlords doing real business in Philadelphia. I am your host, Yuri Skripnichenko, licensed broker and property manager here in Philadelphia. Today, I'm bringing back Alan Astrians for a no-nonsense look at the biggest risk that can be bleed an investor dry. We're not talking about theory, we're talking about the real-world problems that we see every day. What do you do when your contractor takes your money and leaves the job half done? How do you protect yourself from wholesalers pushing fantasy rehab numbers and crazy ARVs? And on top of that, we've got new threats coming from politicians. Talk of rent freezes in New York spilling over onto Philadelphia, and now proposal for 50-year mortgages. Are those solutions, or are they traps that will just pour fuel on the fire? Alan is back to help us cut through the noise and give practical advice. Let's jump into it. Hi, Alan. Welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us again. And can you start with introducing yourself and who you are, what you do, why it's important for us to listen to you in Philadelphia for landlords?
Yuri, thank you again for having me. I think we had a really good discussion last time, so I reached out to you, and I thought it would be a really good idea to do this again. So my name is Alan. I am a real estate agent and an investor in the Philadelphia area, primarily in the Northeast Philadelphia, Bucks County, Montgomery County area. And I've been doing this for a little bit over 5 years now. And I try to have my knowledge that I've learned from, investing in real estate sales, and passing that on to prospective investors, home buyers, and home sellers, and helping them make the right real estate choices.
Yeah, actually, our episode that we recorded last time was one of the most viewed episodes on the channel, and we had a lot of good reviews and good feedback on that. So thank you for joining us again. And Alan, where do you invest yourself in Philly? Is it any specific area that you invest, or like all over the place?
Typically, it's Northeast Philadelphia is where primarily my biggest portfolio is. It's in like Torresdale. I have a property in Fox Chase. I also have a few properties in Roxborough as well. I did live there for a little bit of time, so I managed to invest in a few properties while I lived there. And now I'm kind of shifting a little bit of my focus into the Bucks County area, still pursuing options in Northeast Philly, but kind of moving towards that suburbs, Bucks County area, as I'm also migrating myself physically into those locations as well.
Is there any specific reason why you're shifting to Bucks County versus Philly?
So, hindsight is 2020, and if I were to kind of do it all over again, I'd probably invest in Bucks County over Northeast Philly. And the reason why, there's actually a couple reasons. The price to rent ratios are a lot higher in Bucks County. I tend to find tenants that are higher qualified in the Bucks County areas, especially where people are looking at like decent school districts, because the Philadelphia school district is not the best rated. So oftentimes people are not moving to Northeast Philadelphia for a particular reason other than maybe they just grew up in the neighborhood or they live close to work or something along those lines. Whereas in Bucks County, the school district is something that really does elevate the area. And just to give you a perspective, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom rental in the area that I have invested in Bucks County in the Ben-Salem area, I can rent for $1,900 to $2,000 a month with no garages, no basements. Whereas in Philadelphia with the garages and basements, I can rent them for maybe maximum, I would say $1,800 a month, maximum. And that's depending on which location, which pocket that you're in. So, and the value for which I bought that duplex, back then wasn't that different. Now, I think the prices are catching up a lot more in the Bucks County area. I think that the duplexes are now worth a lot more because people are seeing that, obviously. And the other reason is that the Philadelphia landlord laws do not necessarily apply to the Bucks County rentals. So things like evictions and anything landlord tenant related is a lot smoother in favor of the landlord in Bucks County.
Yeah, that is definitely true. But our podcast is for Philly landlords, and I do not know how many of our listeners actually invest in Bucks County. But if they're not, it's probably a good place to look for a new investment. But from what I see, it's not that easy to find any, as you said, duplex in Bucks County. It doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter in which township, and also there are a lot of different townships. What I like or what I do not like about investing outside of the city, since I'm investing myself in the city only, specifically in Philadelphia, I do not go outside of the city. And the reason is because as soon as you get out of the city of Philadelphia, every single township will have their own landlord tenants laws. And if you're buying 1 or 2 properties, that is fine. It doesn't matter. You can have one in Ben-Salem, the other one in, I don't know, Southampton, and you can just deal with 2 townships and you know what's happening. But when you have 10, 15, or maybe 20 properties all in different townships, that becomes a headache because you have to follow specific guidelines from each township. You have to file specific paperwork. In some townships require you to have inspections, some don't. Some require rental licenses, some don't. And that all depends on, I guess, your personal investment criteria and what you're looking to do. But again, for me, it's just with the number of rentals that I have or that I own and manage as well, it would not be that easy to set up the easy process of managing those rentals. That's why I tend to stay away from getting outside of the city and invest in the city, as well as the city is my bread and butter. That's what I know. That's where I work, and that's what I can talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
I think also to your point too, it's finding 1 or 2 properties is one thing, but finding the 15 properties in Bucks County is very, very tough. The market is a double-edged sword, right? If you have the property, renting it out and getting a decent return is possible, but finding it and getting it at the right price is incredibly, incredibly challenging. And you're right, every township has its own regulations and its own procedures for rental licensing. So for example, in Ben-Salem, I have to have somebody from the township actually come in and monitor that I have all of the proper safety equipment installed, smoke detectors, that I have locks, like I have window screens. I have all these kinds of little things that can be very tedious and annoying when you're dealing with multiple properties. When you have, 1 or 2, it's one thing, right? Or if it's like updated or whatnot. But actually, in one of those properties, the township lady came in and she made me repave my entire driveway, which was a $7,000 expense. Now, the driveway could have lasted, honestly. Like it didn't necessarily need to be. It was kind of like on that teeter-totter kind of space. But, in order to get my license, I had to spend $7,000 right off the bat to get that done. So if you are considering buying in a Bucks County kind of market, those kinds of things need to be, kind of set in stone. So you have to make sure that all those things are up to good standards.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good segue for us to talk about this new thing that our president just tweeted recently, or the 50-year mortgages, and how do you think that can affect the market? And do you think, like, what are your thoughts on that? When I read, I definitely have a lot of my own thoughts about it, but I'm wondering to hear what you think about it as a professional who's working in real estate.
So initially, I thought about a couple things. I thought about, okay, well, you know, what are the actual pros and cons behind getting a 50-year mortgage? And the first thing I thought about is this, is that most people don't actually get a 30-year mortgage and pay it off for 30 years and they're done with it. Many people during that period of time, they sell their real estate, they refinance, they do something else with that property or that mortgage, and many people don't actually hold on to it, which, kind of got me thinking to like, well, if you could lower your liability of your monthly payment, maybe benefit from more cash flow, maybe save a little bit more money per month. If you're not holding on to that mortgage for a certain amount of time, then, what's the big deal? So then I started actually kind of doing the numbers and seeing, what are you actually saving? What are you actually getting? Like, what's the actual benefit from it, right? Because, if you're getting a substantial cash flow benefit, or, a decent margin between 30-year and 50-year per month, then maybe it's actually worth it for a lot of people to buy that property, because especially for investors, they're going to be leveraged pretty much for their entire lives. For most people, not many people are the Dave Ramsey, pay everything off as fast as you can. Most people are going to be leveraging. So whether it's 30 years or 50 years, what's the big difference? But then I started doing the math, and the difference in the payments between a 30-year and a 50-year mortgage was actually very minimal, because you have to kind of also, you have to also account for the interest rate increase. I don't think that they would be giving you a 50-year mortgage at the same rate as you would be getting a 30-year mortgage. Same thing goes for 15-year and 30-year. Now, the difference between a 15-year and a 30-year mortgage is that with the 15-year, you do get a big savings, but the payment difference is actually very drastic between a 15-year and a 30-year, which is why a lot of people opt for the 30-year mortgage. And, after the year 7 mark or so is when you kind of start to really pay off a good amount of principal. With the 50-year option, you're only saving a very marginal amount per month, but you're paying so much interest over the life of the loan. And because that interest is so front loaded in the beginning of the loan, that if you decide to sell even over a decade later, you would have only paid off like a very, very small fraction of it. So, you would have to pretty much bank on property values increasing, which again could happen because more people can maybe afford that extra $200-300 a month. So, maybe in the beginning it blips up, but I think financially it's not the best decision.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said about it, but also what I was thinking is that the whole point of them talking about this 50-year mortgage is to have more affordable housing, right? So the idea is that your payment will be lower, that you would be able to buy a house that you cannot buy right now, and you would afford to have that mortgage. But the whole idea of affordability is for people to actually get in the housing and start growing the equity in the property and own something. If you give people 50 years mortgages, just think about it. Even if you are a 25 years old guy and right out of the college, you decided that you will buy this house and pay it for 50 years, you will be 75 years old man by the time when it's fully paid off. Right. And for most people, they're not buying it at 25 years old. They buy it at the 30 years mark and older. So by the time when you actually get to use that product and pay it fully, most people will not even see that the end of that mortgage. They will just pass away by that time. Right. And at the same time, you will increase the amount of people who would be on the market. By doing so, you will increase the value of the properties, because we are not building enough of properties, especially affordable properties. And if you're providing people with some product that gives them more power to buy, That means that we will have more buyers, we will have less sellers, we still do not have enough supply, and the prices will go up again. And that will kind of kick in the back both buyers for 30 years mortgage and 50 years mortgage. So I don't think you're actually achieving any affordability, and you just making it worse for people who's actually getting those 50 years loans because they will never pay them off during their lifetime. And on average, people in the United States own a property for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take this 12 years, and as you mentioned, for the 50 years loan, you're not actually paying off or not starting paying off the loan until probably like year 22 or 27. So if you buy this property with 50 years loan and you sell it in 12 years, you may be underwater. You do not know what the market will look like. You will not have any equity at all, like literally zero. And you still have all of these fees, transfer tax, agent fees, closing fees. So I think the whole idea maybe is good to provide with some affordable product, but the way how it can play out, I do not see that it will be helpful to anyone at all. With the only exception that if they create some product for 50 years loan that is available for investors, that may be a little bit different. Not for a regular Joe who's buying a house for themselves, but for me as an investor, if I cannot buy or afford a house in Bucks County with 30 years mortgage and have this $1,900 rent coming in, but I can do it with 50 years, then it kind of helps both sides, the landlord and the tenant. By spreading my money over 50 years, I can have lower monthly payments, so I still get some cash flow. And for the tenant, that means that their rent will not be as high as it would be.
Right.
But I think that's what they were talking about. And on the other side, something that we discussed as well is the new mayor of New York City and rent freezes in New York. What do you think about that? And how do you think that would affect our Philadelphia market?
The idea to freeze rents, I think, will only continue to lock up supply. And I think that it will create a giant imbalance in the New York market. Also, there's a lot of people who are, business consumer minded, I would say, entrepreneurial, capitalist, that I think are not going to be backing a lot of these ideas. And I think from that, there will be a bit of an exodus that will be coming to the Philadelphia area or to more affordable areas where people have more, rights or things that they can have. But because with the freeze the rent idea, in theory, it's good. I think it's like a short-term, play, like, okay, yes, your rents don't go up, people can afford things or whatnot. But what's happening with freeze the rent is that when you create, rental stability apartments, a lot of times people have that apartment and the rent doesn't go up or it can't go up, for example. What are the people that have the apartment going to do? They're just going to keep renting and renting and renting and renting and renting. And that supply will never reach the market again because they want to lock in that rate. It's like the 3% mortgage rate. It's the same concept. No one wants to sell their house anymore because they don't want to get rid of the 3%. Same thing with freeze the rent. If your rent is 30% less than market, why the heck would I ever give it up if I can just have it, maybe pass it down to my family or whatever, if I continue to take care of it? The other issue is that if a landlord can't bump up rents to the market and they're locked in at a certain rate, they're not going to want to do any sort of repairs, or even sometimes I even see that landlords don't even want to put the property onto the market because the cost to renovate the property is far too great for the return that you would get. So it's cheaper to not invest the money and to have it vacant, which also limits supply from the market. So I think it sounds cool, but in practice, it's just gonna create more of an inventory lockup, and it's actually gonna boost the values of other properties, the other rentals even more. And kind of to what you were saying a little bit before about that 50-year mortgage situation as well, is that I think for the regular homeowner, you're right. I think it doesn't make any sense. But for the investor who's looking to maybe benefit for an extra $100, $200 of cash flow per month, I think it makes sense for that person, because then people don't have to charge exuberant amounts of rents in order to get that kind of cash flow. So ultimately, I think that these policies in New York, they're gonna really affect the Philadelphia market. Long-winded answer, but yeah.
So your idea is that if they do this rent freeze in New York, the investors from New York, they will start buying in Philly and just inflate our market.
Investors and homeowners, and they're already actually seeing this in Connecticut a little bit too, where homeowners, it's not like COVID where people kept their apartments and then they moved to like another area just to have a little bit more space. Now people are actually going to be dumping their New York real estate and moving into other more favorable markets, like a Pennsylvania, maybe a Connecticut, maybe even a New Jersey market. Like the northern New Jersey, I think the PA market is definitely gonna go up.
Before we continue, I want to thank our sponsor, TrustArt Realty. Today we're talking about all the risks that can sink a deal, from bad contractors to bad math. It's a perfect reminder that managing a Philly rental property is a full-time job. If you're tired of tenant headaches, the L&I compliance paperwork, and the late-night calls, my team at TrustArt Realty can take care of all of it for you. We are a full-service property management company built by investors in Philly for investors in Philly. We know the market because we are in the market. We're offering all of our listeners a free property management evaluation. Let us show you how we can help you stay compliant and profitable. Email us at trustartrealty@phillylandlordguy.com or click the link in the show notes or go to our website at trustartrealty.com to schedule a call, and we will help you. All right, back to the show. Do you think it's just a hype and the people just do not understand what exactly that means, the rent freeze? Because first time when I heard about it, I'm really trying to stay away from all the political news and news in general. Yeah. I consume what I need to know, but I do not go into like all of those political nitty-gritty details because I just do not like to be hyped up about it. But when I first time heard about that, they're talking about rent freezes in New York, I was like, wait, what does it mean? How are they going to freeze the rent? So they will just tell me as a landlord that I cannot charge more than $1,000 for my apartment? Or what kind of processes they have in place to do that? And then I read about it a little bit more, and basically what it says, it's a rent freeze for subsidized housing. So basically, I guess if you put it onto Philadelphia, it's for all housing that are subsidized by PHA. Mm-hmm. And New York, from what I gathered, it's about 2 million of those units, which is a lot. Yeah. Especially if you compare to Philly. But still, it's just a part of the units available in New York. So it's not the blanket freeze for the whole city. It's just for those units who are subsidized by the government or by the New York City. And people who are dumping their, condos in Manhattan and moving out to other places, do you think it's just they do not understand what they're doing, or they're afraid that can eventually catch up with them and they won't be able to sell their house or rent their house for what it's actually worth?
Yeah, I think there is a couple of, whenever you have any sort of like major political like change or ideology, there's always like some sort of fear that's behind it from a group of people that will take that fear and then just immediately apply it because they're worried about something. Yes, of course. Do I think that it's going to possibly create drastic change in New York? I don't think it's going to be like a light switch and something's going to flip. If in fact these policies do, because at the end of the day, just because somebody said it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. It has to go through checks and balances. That's why we have such a stable and solid government. That's why people, leave their country to come here, because it's not just, hey, I said this and this is what it's going to be. It has to go through a system of checks and balances. So I don't know how it's going to actually affect it 100%. Now, if it were to actually go into place, then ultimately, I think the investors are definitely going to be getting the short end of the stick for the in the New York market, because if the reason why people do, at least in Philadelphia, why they do the PHFA and the Section 8 is because they get a subsidy from the government to actually get a little bit more rents because they're taking on technically more risk. And because of that, they're able to collect a little bit more income and provide that housing. And if you limit that, right, and now the risk is still higher, but now your payout is lower, what's going to be the incentive for those investors to buy those kinds of properties? Probably not much. And so that's going to dry up that I guess public housing or whatever it is. And ultimately, I think that it'll have the inverse effect. So I think a lot of politicians, and I agree with you, I try also to stay away from politics as much as I can, unless it's like directly related to real estate or something that's I know that can actually affect my market or something local or something like, actually important to me. But, I think people have to be careful what people say and what people, kind of portray, because sometimes it's just talk and it's just kind of in the air. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think from my experience, what we've seen or what I've seen is, I would say somewhere around COVID, that's where it picked up, that we started having many more investors coming from New York or out-of-state investors, but New York as well. So I think just a shift policy like this may make more New York investors come into our market, which will be bad for us in the sense that we already have kind of tight market. It's not easy to find a good property or a good investment that can actually make any money for you. But if we have this influx of investors coming from New York that have bigger pockets, in the sense that they have more money and they're able to buy up more of these properties, I don't think that will increase the rents, because our rents already hit the ceiling and they are not growing. And it's not just in Philly, it's the whole country. And this year, the rents are actually a little bit going down compared to what it was before. So I don't think that it's a good thing for Philly, all of these New Yorkers coming here, buying up the properties, driving up the prices, but at the same time, the rent stays stagnant. That's just going to be less for us as local investors.
I was just going to mention that I'm not a political expert or anything like that. I just know that with certain kinds of news, it can affect our market, and I think that's important to just kind of look out for. But I don't think that it's something that I can really concretely digest and then say, hey, this is exactly what's going to happen to New York. This is exactly what's going to happen. But that title, that fear, the new mayor, it will definitely have some sort of effect for sure.
Yeah, and I hope that will not have an effect on our own city council and give them some ideas what they can do.
Yeah.
They're already creating so many different things that we as landlords need to be aware of and follow. And if they all of a sudden get this idea that, oh, rent freezes, maybe we should do it in Philly, hopefully they will not. But yeah, talking about all of these investors coming in and us investors buying properties in Philly, we're seeing more and more landlords or investors here getting burned by contractors. Contractors just walking off the job site, leaving projects half finished, or the budgets are completely blown off. How big of a problem do you think this is in the city and right now? And what do you see in your work?
I have had a uptick, and I don't know if this is directly related, because I think this has always been happening, but me personally, I have seen more people reach out or say something on the forums or reach out to me directly about this exact scenario. I bought this house, I paid this contractor a ton of money, he left the job site, and now I have a house that's not even halfway finished, and if I try to finish it, I'm going to lose money. I think a lot of times what happens is a lot of people, maybe they don't see something in their market. So somebody sells them an idea of something being so good and wonderful that they give them all these great numbers, all these returns, right? They're really good at talking. They're really good at, convincing you of how great this investment is, that you don't necessarily do the proper due diligence. You pull the trigger and then you're left holding the bag. So, I think that everyone wants to try to, make that quick buck and try to make that great return. And sometimes people look at things with rose-colored glasses, especially in a market where the economy is tight. Everyone wants to make some money. Instagram is popular. Everyone is apparently the richest person in the world on Instagram, and so everyone wants to be like them. And so what do? They say, oh, listen, if you invest $250,000, put $50,000 into it, you'll sell it for 450, you'll make 100K in profit. Who wouldn't want to invest in that? It's a no-brainer. But when you start to look at the nitty-gritty details of how that was presented to you, and as someone who actually has local market knowledge, you'll start to kind of unpack this and say, hey, this deal was dead from the start. It was an absolute dud. You didn't look at your ARVs correctly. You only looked at active sales, not closed sales. Your contractor estimates are just absolutely way off. And so when you start to, make those numbers a little bit more realistic, you start to realize that it wasn't a deal in the beginning. So
why do you think this is happening? Is it, I'm talking specifically about contractors. Do you think it's just because people are picking up the cheapest guys, like fly-by-night guy, or is there a bigger issue with our labor and skilled labor right now?
It's funny because the quotes that I'm seeing from people, they're not cheap by any means. They're not like incredibly cheap or anything. So I think it might be a due diligence kind of thing where people are not vetting their contractors properly. And contractors are an interesting breed. They're not the best at paperwork. They're not the best at following through. They're not best at time management sometimes, especially when you're going for the cheaper side of it, right? When you go into more premium contractors, right, you're paying the price for someone to be a little bit more adequate. Whereas if you're trying to save money, you don't know what you're necessarily getting into. And if you don't have construction experience and you don't have experience managing a project, knowing what needs to be done, and you're dealing with somebody who's inadequate, you can't be on top of them and tell them, hey, what are you doing? Is this right? Is that wrong? And by the end of it, you already paid them $80,000 to $90,000 for absolutely nothing. And now, because they've mismanaged their time and they mismanaged their finances, they walk away from the project. Whereas somebody like me, if I saw that contractor and I saw the work that he was doing, I wouldn't be paying him in such installments so frequently unless I actually saw correct progression and the work being done correctly. So, kind of having this thought as I'm explaining this, I think that a lot of people don't know the mechanics behind construction. And so the contractor says, oh, give me $10,000 because I need windows. Give me $10,000 because I need floors. Give me 10,000, and they just collect this money and they don't know how to, really see the progress of a project. And then they've already given them so many funds that nothing actually even happened. Whereas I would walk in, or somebody like you that has the experience, and the contractor's asking me for X amount of money, I'd be like, what do you need it for? Oh, well, I need it for this. Well, this is not even done. That's not even done. And then from that period, I would know, without over investing time and money, that contractor needs to go, or that they need to be fired, or that they need to be micromanaged. So, and especially if somebody's trying to micromanage somebody I had a scenario of a guy who called me from all the way from California. How are you going to micromanage a contractor like that? You're not. You need someone, a trusted person that's looking over this. Even in Florida, I know somebody who got burned by this as well, where people are just saying things. Yeah, just give me money for this. Just give me money for that. Well, why? And then when people start questioning it, that's when kind of the problems start occurring. But sometimes people have already overinvested, and that happens.
So when you choose a contractor for your own projects, what kind of questions do you ask them, or what are the red flags that can come up during your interviewing the contractor before they start the work? So
now that I have the experience that I have, I know how certain things are supposed to be, put together and actually, physically put together, right? And when we're doing the walkthrough with the contractor, and I'm speaking with him, I'm pointing out certain things, that this needs to be this way, this needs to be done this way, and I'm also asking them questions about the process and how they will actually do the construction itself. And because of my experience now, I can kind of see, well, if he's explaining to do this project this way, that doesn't sound right. And that kind of screams a little bit of a red flag for me. So, unfortunately for a lot of people that, get involved in these kinds of projects, they don't have the experience. They don't have someone like me or you that knows when a contractor is either just, I don't know how to say this in English. I have the phrase in Russian, but basically like, feeding you BS, let's just say that way, and that's a really big issue. And I know when that's BS, but a lot of people don't. And when I first started, I thought it was all true, but a lot of that stuff was BS. And through experience, you learn what's actually right and what's actually wrong. And for a newer investor that's dealing with a contractor that's doing these walkthroughs, I think it's really, really, really important to do it with a mentor, to do it with somebody that actually has done this before. And maybe you're not making all the profit, or maybe you're making less of a profit, but it's way better to make some money than lose money. And that way you can learn from that person what is actually the right way of approaching it, what's the wrong way of approaching it, how do they manage the contractor, and especially if you're thousands of miles away.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is actually something that we teach people in the Jumpstart program that you, Alan, actually was one of the speakers for our fall class. But you need to understand the construction. It doesn't matter what you do or how you do it in real estate. If you're going to own real estate, you will have turnovers. You will have major problems that you will need to deal with. And whenever you hire these contractors, they will tell you whatever you want to hear. And what I, in connection to what you were saying, what I have seen recently is that, especially for out-of-state clients, that they would buy this property, as you said, I don't know, for $150,000. They will find a contractor who will tell them, I will do it for you for $50,000 or whatever, $100,000, and then they will rent it for $2,500. But the problem is that, first of all, from far away, you cannot actually see what the property looks like, and you cannot know what contractor is exactly doing unless if they put specifics on the paperwork for you. But as you told before, that contractors are not known for being the best with paperwork. So it's not easy to find a good contractor, and it's even harder to find a good contractor who is good with paperwork. So what we're seeing is that contractors do a beautiful job on the surface. So if you take pictures of that house, if you, let's say you flip this house and you sell it, it looks beautiful. You can create a beautiful listing out of it. But once you get into that house with an inspector, all of a sudden you know that, oh, you have knob and tube wiring all over the place. Your plumbing is 70 years old and it's leaking all over the place. As soon as you start your faucet in the tub upstairs, you have a leak in your living room. Your old furnace that you had in the house was replaced with a modern HVAC system, including the air, and that's just not working properly because the old furnace didn't need to have big enough ducts to bring enough air for the upstairs because it didn't have air. It didn't have AC, but for modern ACs, you need to have bigger ducts. But now what happens, your ducts are inside of the walls and you cannot fix it easily. You have to open up all the walls. You need to replace the ducts for your heat or your cool air to come to the second floor. So issues like that stay behind the walls, you cannot see them unless you're actually present at the property when the rehab is happening. And a lot of these contractors, they would just put drywall on the top of the existing walls, so you don't even know what.
Yeah.
So what would you say, what is the right way to structure a contract with contractors to protect yourself? Should landlords be using some kind of milestone payments or holding back, I don't know, whatever amount of money, or using lien waivers? What is the good solution here?
Ultimately, for somebody who's really, really new, and kind of going back to what we talked about before, is that it's really hard for someone that has no experience to know when you need to pay somebody. And that's a lot of times what the issues stem from. And like you're mentioning that, it looks nice in the photos and it's finished or whatever. Some people don't even get to that stage. Some people, the contractor just leaves it with open walls, open plumbing, open electrical, and they've already invested so much money into it. I think it's incredibly, incredibly important, to educate yourself as much, to learn as much as possible. And that oftentimes comes with the cost, not just of the reading material, but maybe investing into somebody that has that experience. I can sit here and say, hey, look, after every project scope is incredibly different. If you're doing a full gut rehab, right, the amount that you pay per interval is going to be different than if you're doing a cosmetic kitchen rehab, or you're just laying down floors. So the scope of the work is really going to determine how you pay. The one tip that I will say is that if you don't hire somebody, or you don't partner with like a solid mentor, is to leave a really big piece of the pie, or a really, I'd say, interesting piece of the pie at the end of the scope of the work. Because if you leave too small of a piece, the contractor is not going to be interested in coming back. So for example, let's say your project costs $20,000 and you only leave $1,000 at the end, and you've already paid them $19,000, but let's say 80% of the work was only finished. You're not going to get that 20% of the work finished for that $1,000. That's just not going to happen. So leave 5. Make it interesting for the contractor to come back and make the money that they want to make. And contractors will push you. They'll say, no, give me 50% up front. Give me this, give me that. And you have to learn how to say no. But again, that's so difficult when you don't have that experience. And like you said, you need to have that experience. There's no other way around it, because you're just going to get burned. So hire somebody or partner up with somebody. If it's a flip, call someone that knows what they're doing in that area. Maybe do some research that person themselves, and split the profits. You'll make money on it, and they'll show you exactly how they break down that contract based on your specific scope of work.
Yeah, it's a good idea to partner up with someone to get that boots on the ground experience. And the way how I did it, when I started, I didn't know anything. I was just doing everything myself. I was replacing my own doors and windows. I was putting new kitchen cabinets, and I didn't know how to do it. I had to ask contractors. I had to watch YouTube videos. But after doing it a few times, of course, I did it wrong. But that was a great lesson to me, and that how I started learning in this business, how I started learning the contractor side of it. And now it's easier for me. When I go and see something, I have an idea how it should be and what should be done to have it done right or have it fixed the right way. But finding those people that have that experience, or finding people that have the right experience that you need, I don't think that's that easy, because as you said, everybody is on Instagram and promising that you will become rich in one day overnight by buying this $200,000 property, putting 100 on it and selling for 450, which is we know it's not true. It's not going to happen in most cases. So if you're looking for that person, you need to make sure that you vet them correctly as well. Or maybe vetting is not the correct word, but you need to make sure that you actually can trust that person. Because again, from my line of work, I've seen so many flips that were done badly. Mm-hmm. And I know people who did those flips, and I know that they do it all the time. And I do not know why they do it this way, but my guesses would be just because it's a flip, and for them it's just profit, and they would cut every single corner to just get more profits, and they know how to cut the corners. So something that maybe it's not going to be that visible for inspector, or it's not going to become a problem within the next few months. But if you have a tenant on the property, so properties always look great until you have tenants in the property. Once you put tenants in, that's when people start, how I call it, actively living in the property. And that's when you get those issues that, hey, my tap is not draining, or my living room ceiling is leaking, or I don't have any heat in the rear bedroom, or I don't have any air in the front bedroom, whatever that is. Right. But you do not see that, even if it was the inspector. When the inspector comes, you may not find those problems until somebody is actually in that property. So if you buy an already flipped property, you want to make sure that it was done correctly. Or if you're flipping it yourself, be a good person, do it right from the beginning, so you avoid problems in the future if you hold the properties, or you will do a good job for whoever is buying that property from you. What your advice to the person who already is in that high water situation right now? So let's say, as you mentioned, somebody from California called you. What did you tell them?
I asked them to break down all of the numbers for me. And the immediate thing that I saw as a little bit of a red flag was that the person didn't have the numbers like ready to go. And that already kind of told me a little bit that there wasn't enough due diligence being taken place. So I asked them, what did you buy it for? What did you invest it for? What are your lender fees? And so we ran down the actual fees and everything that was, involved in the project. And then in order to see, okay, if you hire a more reputable contractor or somebody who's a little bit more trustworthy and you bring the project to the finish line, are you going to walk away with this okay? And, I think fortunately for that person, maybe they'll walk away with a very small loss and try to mitigate that loss if they do the work properly. But for somebody in that scenario, I think it's really important to reach out to a local expert and to reach out to somebody who is actually reputable, trustable, Google reviews, like, maybe there's credibility through like a Bigger Pockets forum or something like that. I would love to say, yeah, just call me. No problem. I'll point you into the right direction. But every market is going to be, different. But in the Philadelphia market, yeah, if somebody is in that predicament, they have, no issue. They can just give me a call. I can look at their scenario and kind of offer my 2 cents on what I think. So yeah, it's important to cut the bleeding right away and to really, really pivot. And to your point before, this stuff is not easy, and it's made out to sometimes be so easy. It's like, buy it for this, renovate it for this, sell it for that. And in principle, right, that's the high level view of it, but there's just so much of it below here that it's definitely way more complicated. So,
And as you said, there is this notion, I guess, or advertisement that you see that you buy it for this, renovate it for this, and then this is your ARV. And a lot of this often comes from wholesalers. And I'm not saying that wholesalers are bad. I've bought quite a few properties from wholesalers myself, and I get a lot of emails on a daily basis from them, sending me deals as well. And I'm looking at them all the time. And I would buy a deal from a wholesaler, but I know how to look for a deal. For a beginner investor, it's a little bit harder. And as a beginner investor or a landlord, you rely on somebody's information or knowledge or data that they provide you. And most of these emails that you receive, or text messages or calls, whatever the channels that you receive that information from, they come with the data that you're looking for. They tell you that this is you buy it for, this is what you buy it for, this is what you need to spend for the rehab, and this is your ARV. So can you tell about, or can we talk a little bit about those values, and what do you think? Are they correct? Do people should accept them for the face value, or how do you react to that?
Never trust anybody. Always do your due diligence. Or maybe not even trust. That's a little harsh, but trust but verify. But I think that's the best approach. And whenever you're flipping anything, especially flipping, right? If you're buying and holding, all right, if you're planning on holding it for 10 years, you bought it for $10,000 or $15,000 more than what you should have bought it for, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? Because you're going to be holding that property. Your monthly payment is not going to be too effective. But when you're flipping something, every dollar that you spend on the property is going against your profit. And when you buy the property, that's when you actually make the money on the property. And oftentimes these wholesalers, even agents, they will push the values for something. They'll maybe reach too far to go get a comp, and maybe they'll reach too far in terms of the square footage or where it's located, or if it's actually been sold or even on the market yet. And they'll use that data to fluff up their values. And also oftentimes I see people underestimating construction costs. And the best way to combat this is to do your own due diligence, try to find properties or comparables that are as close to your property as possible in square footage, in location, which is really, really important, and things that actually have sold recently. I see a lot of times wholesalers and agents saying, hey, you can sell your house for $400,000. Okay, well, which comp did they use? They used the comp that was half a mile away, and that's not even under contract, and it's been on the market for 50 days. It hasn't even sold. So you can't use something that hasn't sold. So whenever you're running your numbers, always underestimate your after repair value and overestimate your rehab cost. If you walk away from that project selling it for more than what you ran your numbers on, or you spent less money on the construction cost, that's just a bonus. That's just all profit. So that way you know that under these very conservative circumstances, I will make money, then you will for sure be in a positive position, and anything on top is just on top. It's just it's just butter.
Yeah, I would also suggest to talk to an accountant before you decide if it's going to be buy and hold or if you just flip in the property, because you will have to pay taxes on that profit if you make that profit.
Yeah.
And I am a buy and hold guy. I never flip, but I had a flip first time ever in my life this year, and it was not by design. I think I spoke about it in one of the podcasts before. But I bought this property with the goal in mind that I will hold it forever. But during the construction or rehab, first of all, I spent more than I expected to spend on the property. And it was just in the hot market area where it didn't make sense for me to hold because my rent amount was much lower than the ARV of the property. And it just made all the sense in the world for me to sell it because I was making a decent profit on the property. So I did sell it, and I sold it within 7 days being on the market. But it was in the beginning of the year. Market was a little bit hotter at that time. But now, coming to the end of the year, I have to pay taxes on that, and I am very unhappy about it. So I do not know next time if I have that situation, if I would just keep the property or sell it again. But next year we'll tell once I pay those taxes. But you said that you need to do your own due diligence. And again, when you're a beginner investor or you've done it a couple times, it may be a little bit more complicated for you because you just do not know how to do it or where to get numbers. And I would say one of the places that even if you do not have a mentor or if you do not have somebody to reach out to, your lender, if you're using a lender, and I would recommend using a lender because lender, it would be that kind of brake pedal for you that who will tell you that, no, we will not lend on this property. And if a lender tells you that they will not lend on the property, it's probably not a good project for you. They're not telling you that because you're not qualified. They're telling you that because the property is not qualified. If the lender is not lending, they probably thinking that you will not make enough money to pay them back. And
right.
if that's what they see, you probably should stay away. And then when you use a lender, they will ask you for that budget for the contractors. And they will lend you money only as the project goes along. So once your windows are installed, you can get paid for the windows and so on. So it's kind of a check mark for you that will keep you in place. But again, going back to Alan, what you were saying, how do you do that due diligence and how do you build your own realistic rehab budget?
That's a really tough question because especially somebody who doesn't have experience, it's really, really hard to, I guess, like try to see what something might cost. There is a book from Bigger Pockets on flipping real estate, and there is a section on like rehab estimates. The problem is that that book I think was maybe published a couple years ago, and material costs have gone up quite significantly. I'm actually finding that before, like 5 years ago, my labor costs were always higher than my material costs, and now it's the inverse. Now my materials cost more than my labor, and so in reality, it's tough to find what the actual budget might be. The best way to probably do it is to ask multiple contractors for multiple bids. And that way you can have an idea of what the range is. Because if somebody's telling you 50,000, but two other people are telling you 100,000, well, it's probably closer to that specific range over there. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Having a local mentor, someone who is in this business consistently doing these kinds of things, is the best way to get a really good estimate on whether or not of like what a potential rehab budget would be. So I even offer this service to a lot of clients, and because right now finding a flip on the MLS is incredibly challenging, right? It's just, by the time it hits the market, there's already 50 other people who have the same exact idea as you, and by the time it gets bid up, there's no value in it. And I think you always have to be careful of wholesalers too, but wholesalers can actually provide you really, really good deals, and they should absolutely get compensated for it when that happens. Like I've seen some numbers before. I was like, wow, I wish I knew this wholesaler. I wish I bought this deal because it was actually such a good deal. But for somebody that's kind of getting into this, it's important to get in touch with somebody like myself, or like a professional that can run the numbers for you, even actually probably visit the property and tell you, hey, is this a good deal or not? And then if you buy it off the market, I can run the numbers for you. I can give you realistic ARV values so that you have another, I guess, second set of eyes just looking at the property. And that way you do your due diligence. The wholesaler gives you one thing, the agent gives you another thing, and now you have two solid opinions, essentially.
I would also add to that, when you compare bids from contractors, make sure that you are comparing apple to apple, not an egg to an apple. If you ask in one contractor, or if you just tell them, hey, go to this property and give me a bid to rehab it, every contractor will have a different idea of what that rehab means, what you want them to be doing or not doing, what you want to get done or not. So you need to build that list of the items that you need to do. And the more detailed the list is, the better outcome you will get. And that way, if you have a list of items, at least it can be simple. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but tell them that I want to have a full gut. I want this wall to be removed. I want to put drywall here. This is the kitchen cabinets that I want. This is the layout that I will have. This is the tile I will have. The whole bathroom will be tiled, or just the tile around the tub. So you need to give specifics, and then you would be able to compare a quote from one contractor to a quote from another contractor. If you just tell them, hey, I just want new bathroom, new kitchen, and new drywall,
Right.
they will quote you for whatever they think that you will want to have. You have backsplash, you don't have backsplash. You have fully tiled bathroom, you don't have fully tiled bathroom. You have, I don't know, acrylic bathtub, you have the regular $100 bathtub. So it all depends on what specifics you have. And as Alan, as you said, the material prices are so much more expensive now than they used to be. And the difference between cheap materials and good materials are even bigger now than it used to be.
Right.
So just keep in mind, and when you're building up your budget, that you have specifics that you want to get done, and then you can compare those quotes between contractors, not just a quote for a full rehab.
I usually don't defend contractors, but this is the case where I would defend a contractor and say, all right, well, if you had in your head, like you said, fully tile a bathroom versus just do the tub surround, and you don't explain that to the contractor, they can't read your mind. And the cost of fully tiling a bathroom versus just the tub surround, those are two different costs. And a lot of times I see that being a conflict of like, well, we talked about this. Well, it's 50-50. So you're absolutely right. In your scope of work, it has to be so clear that a 5-year-old can understand it. And the more detailed it is, the more points that you have in your contract. I want it to be with this tile. I want this grout, like almost annoyingly complicated. And honestly, nowadays you could throw it into ChatGPT or like an AI software that like you don't have to sit there and do it. You could just kind of give it like a prompt, but then you can go through and make it a very, very detailed list so that when you go to the project, you go to the scope, you just check it off. And you and the contractor are both on the same page. He can give you the runaround. and you know that you're getting exactly what
Yeah, and once you find that contractor that you're happy with, that does a good job for you, just keep them, make them happy, pay them as you supposed to, because
Right.
it's not easy to find good contractors. It's not easy to keep them. And once you get one, keep them, and they will make you happy. They will make you money. You will make money for them. It's a win-win for everyone. I have relationship with my contractors that doing my projects that been doing it for a long time, and I trust them. I know they know what I need, and I don't ever need to create that detailed budget anymore. They just know that, hey, we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did at the previous property. They will go in, quote it on for me, and then I just give them my credit card. I would not recommend anyone doing that. Do not give your credit cards to contractors. But these contractors that I just have personal relationship with, and I've known them for years, and that works for me. So I trust them, they trust me, and it's a good relationship. So once you find those people, keep them in your team. Do not keep shopping around for a cheaper quote. You can always get cheaper quote, but
Right.
the cheaper quote comes with its own negatives.
Right. Yeah, it's important to keep them around. And I have a contractor, for example, too, that, I've learned to trust him and I've learned to kind of work with him. And I like the way that he works, that I actually recommend him and give him a lot of business in order to promote his own business. And that kind of works as like a mutual relationship because my clients get a pretty decent service. He gets extra business. And then whenever I have a project, I know exactly what to expect from that person. But my only recommendation with that is no matter how much you also like you get that like my clients I'll give them that person, for example. They say, well, do you trust them? I say, well, yeah, I do, but no matter what, always do your due diligence, always write the contract, develop that relationship first, and then once you have that relationship, then you can kind of not have as not have as a detailed of a contract, and once you have that kind of relationship. But usually it's always just really good to just take that extra step and to really write everything down.
Yeah, and it takes time to develop that relationship. It's not going to happen after first flip or after first job. I've had experience when I had an amazing contractor who did an amazing job for me, and then the second job they just dropped the ball. They just completely ghosted me or wasted money or whatever else happened with them. So yeah, it definitely takes time. It definitely takes multiple projects for you to establish that trust. But when you do, that's a beautiful thing.
It's really it's really interesting because and this I think comes from a really interesting perspective here, is that a lot of people have friends that they don't trust with money, right? People that they've known for years and years and years and years and years, and they have certain things about that person that they wouldn't even give them $100, for example. But yet people are giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to a complete stranger without doing all these checks and balances, right? So like you have to look at it from that perspective too. That relationship that you create with that person takes a lot of time, just like a good friendship. And you absolutely need to vet everybody as much as possible. And yeah, if you wouldn't trust your friend with this much money, why would you trust a stranger? Especially.
So between all of this bad contractors, bad wholesaler math, and political risks that we have around us, what is your one piece of advice for the Philly investor to stay profitable and sane for the rest of this year or beginning of the next?
It's a good question. It's to, like, again, make sure that you're making a calculated and proper decision. Make sure that you're talking to as many people as possible so that you can formulate the right opinion without creating that analysis paralysis. Make sure that you're reaching out to the right people. Make sure that you're doing your own due diligence. And for most people, I think that the buy and hold strategy is a lot less risky than probably doing like a fix and flip. And again, investing in the right location, investing in the right people, and putting in the right people into that property. I think, the old school rules are always the best. Location, location, location. Make sure you're buying the right property and make sure you're in touch with the right people who can give you the right guidance.
Yeah. Alan, this being actionable as usual. Remind our listeners where they can find you and how they can connect with you. And we will drop that in the comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is really good. My Instagram handle is my last name, then my first name. So it's Asrians Alan, ASRIANTS ALAN. And then my phone number is not a bad idea too, to shoot me a text, 267-767-0111. And those are usually the best methods. And if you want to look up me on Bigger Pockets, you just type in my name onto the Bigger Pockets platform and I should show up.
Sounds good. Thank you, Alan, for showing up for us and for all of this great information. And I hope we'll talk to you next time. That's all the time we have for today on the Feel a Landlord Guy. Alan, thank you for coming back and sharing some serious practical advice. My key takeaway today: this is a business of risk management, whether it is the contract you sign with the builder, the numbers you personally run on a deal, or the political headlines you're watching. You have to do your own homework. Do not trust, verify. Thanks for listening. If you found this episode valuable, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, put a like, share it. It helps other fellow landlords find the show. That's it. We'll see you on the next one.